Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh my goodness. Live around the world on wrong button. There we go. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Just complaining about short, and I was short myself. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to Monday. It is the beginning of another great week, partway into February. How did that happen? I have no idea. Here we are getting ready to do it. Today is a big show today. We're getting ready to dive into it. It's the return of Montalbano Monday. Just like saying that. It's just fun. Sarah Montalbano is going to be joining us, energy analyst and writer, policy expert, author, columnist, all around good egg. I mean, she's going to be coming in, boy, to talk to us today about the AKLNG project. Then in hour two, I've got a treat. I've got a treat for you. I hope you're sticking around into hour two. Commonwealth North, which is a think tank here in the state of Alaska, had a forum the other night that included Senator Cathy Geissel, Senator Kaufman, and former Senator Natasha von Imhof. And man, there were some things said there that you've got to hear. And in fact, we're going to go through a lot of that here in hour two. I'm going to bring it to you straight from the horse's mouths, and it will be interesting to say the least. So be looking forward to that in hour two. It's going to be we're going to be breaking some stuff down, talking about some stuff, and getting a peek behind the curtain at what a lot of these folks really, truly think. It should be educational, if nothing else. All right. Well, let's not dally here. Let's get right on to it. Since our guest is here, and she's a very important person, I will tell you that right now. And she's here to share with us. I don't want to take any more of her time. Sarah Montalbano, our guest here. Writer, and again, was with the American Experiment, and I've already forgotten, Sarah. What's the name? What's the new gig? You got a new gig, sister. Tell us about it.
I do have a new gig. I am with Always On Energy Research, which is a nonprofit energy modeling firm. So I'm doing a lot of computational stuff now. That's been very exciting. So I'm the energy policy analyst there.
Maths are hard, Sarah. That sounds really good. Maths are hard. All right. Well, Sarah's coming on board today to talk to us because she, well, first of all, we love hearing from her about just about any topic. And secondly, because she just wrote an article here this last week, which talks about the AKLNG line. You could find her, by the way, at Montalbano Mondays on Substack, which is over there. And she's got a great new article talking specifically about the AKLNG pipeline and its chance of coming closer to reality. So let's just dive into that and get started. So Sarah, tell us what's the latest and greatest, because I guess before we get started, I guess I should say that I am I'm hopeful about the gas line, but I'm not optimistic. I guess I'll just put it that way. Hopeful, but not optimistic. You tell me if I'm wrong. Give us the latest on what you're reading from the outside looking in.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you emailed me about this article because I actually got a couple people who said, I think this is nonsense. I don't think this is ever going to happen. It's just going to be too expensive. So I want to clarify a little bit that I think that this is closer than it's ever been to reality. And I don't think the next steps are going to be necessarily easy or inexpensive to do. So I think hopeful. But not optimistic is maybe the right way to describe me too. AKLNG actually put out a press release week or two ago announcing some pretty major agreements, including with NSTAR. So NSTAR's agreed to offtake some of this natural gas. Obviously, basically the largest utility in South Central, and that would be great news for residential heating with natural gas. So a suite of different announcements all coming together. Still no news that I know of on updated cost estimates, which I think is going to be really the sticking point here. But I have a lot of opinions about why getting this on the ground and getting it delivering natural gas to Alaskans is a great thing.
No, I mean, I think we can all agree that having access to our own resource would be an amazing thing. And I've said that for years. I've been a proponent of trying to get the gas to market for years, not only for the resource and the revenue that it could derive for the state itself, but more importantly, in my mind, the access that Alaskans could have to be able to utilize their own resources, right? To burn natural gas in communities like Fairbanks and others that have been kind of snubbed on the whole affordable energy thing. I often, I've often commented that when I moved from Fairbanks down to Wasilla, over the first 8 months, I saved almost $5,000 in utilities alone just by switching from heating oil to natural gas, and of course going to a little bit milder climb. But I mean, overall, it would be amazing, not to mention the potential for added on industries and value added and things like that. But of course, the main hurdle on this, the main stumbling block on this, has been the economics of it. Nobody, no private entity could make it work and make it pencil out, and that's been the biggest problem here.
I would agree with that. And I think for better or for worse, for the libertarian spirit, the federal government's going to step in here. I think that's pretty clear. But they've also put a lot of pens to paper with, agreements with Asian nations to get exports, which I think is a positive sign for at least the financing side of this. I think there's other things going for it too. And I was doing some research this morning, and I found a statement from one of Glenfarne's representatives that it's following the same route as the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline. And they better understand soil conditions. The pipeline right-of-way and permits for Alaska LNG are secured, and contractors with Arctic experience are more available. So they are more optimistic that this is going to be easier than the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, which did experience material cost overruns. And I think all of that's a good point. We're going to have more expertise to be able to do it, and I think that will be something that works in favor of the pipeline.
Well, we definitely know more about what we're doing than we did back in the 70s when we were building the pipeline for the first time. I mean, that was definitely a tough situation. So we've got a lot of that. And to your point about bringing the federal government into it, I'm thinking more and more that might be a likelihood. I mean, it might be, something along the lines, they'll use phrasing like strategic asset or something like that. And there might be, but I mean, we're talking about, we still haven't seen the price tag, the final investment decision, right? We still haven't seen the final price tag. $44 billion was the price tag during the Walker administration. Of course, that was pre-COVID, pre-tariffs, pre-Japan buying U.S. steel, pre a lot of these other things. I've seen some number, somebody's been floating around a number to say, they think it's come down to 38 billion. I would find that hard to believe, quite honestly. I've seen other estimates upwards of $100 billion. So I just don't know where it's going to go. And I don't know how many private, investors or equity firms or anybody else who's going to want to get involved unless something like the federal government steps in as some kind of national security issue at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think there's two important aspects here. Is I think it would really upset this administration to know that the Alaska, Anchorage, all of these places are going to be fueling on imported LNG coming up soon because of this natural gas shortage. I think that would be an embarrassment, quite frankly, at the federal level. And then secondly, it is absolutely a national security issue for them. I believe it's really about making sure we can support our allies in the Pacific, who really do want alternatives to Chinese and Russian oil, but they need to pay a premium to do that with us, and to make sure that the United States has more LNG available for us, should we need it. And I think the playbook here is going to look a lot like what we've seen in the critical minerals space. I've done a lot of work in that, and it's been really fascinating to see because the administration is taking direct stakes in these companies, several of them, including Trilogy Metals, which has claims up in the Ambler Mining District. So there's a lot of direct investment, and I think the attitude is that taxpayers can get back some of what they're putting in. And if we're going to be spending money either on subsidies or tax breaks, well, why don't we just get some potential for a return here? So I don't know if I find that compelling, but I think that's the reasoning. And we could certainly see more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, and like you said, this direct impact where they're taking direct stakes in the company. There was a new earth minerals resource bank that was put together. It had, I think it was 1.7 billion in private equity, and then they had another 9 or 10 billion from some loan equity fund, governmental loan equity fund. So they're trying to do things like that to make us more make it more or palatable, I guess I should say, and workable. But it's, again, that's still the challenge. And my question, you mentioned the agreements with Japan, Taiwan, Korea. We've seen all these, but again, these are all just kind of they're agreements, but they're not binding, right? They're just like, oh yeah, if you build it, we'll buy some, right? I mean, it's just nothing like you can say, oh yeah, absolutely, we're going to buy it no matter what. We'll throw them. No, it's like, well, if you build it, we'll buy some, kind of thing. Do you think that that's going to be enough to sway the needle on this in that regard?
Yeah, to my knowledge, there's not a lot of binding contracts out there. I think some of the major agreements that they just announced for gas supply and for gas offtake are more binding. But these agreements with foreign nations, I don't think are. And so I think that's important too, is coming to get the investment for phase one of the project. That's the part that's going to be, delivering gas to Alaskans. And then phase two is the actual LNG export side. So if we can get more solid support on phase two, that can fund part of phase one. So I'm hopeful that the cost estimates are going to be lower than what we are anticipating here. I believe the 38 million floated around right before the pandemic, I want to say. So I don't think that's going to hold. But I think, they were supposed to have a final investment decision at the end of last year, and now we still haven't heard anything. So that is a sign that they need to be getting up and getting some numbers out here for people. Again, I'm hopeful and I am somewhat optimistic about it, but I think a lot's going to hinge on the price tag.
Sarah Montalbano is our guest. She's with Always On Energy Research, and she writes for the Wall Street Journal and all the other big major public. I've seen her. I saw you the other day. I saw you were publishing something the other day. I just came across the article. Surprise, surprise. And I can't.
All right.
I can't remember where it was at. I was like, wow, she keeps hitting the big time. All right, Sarah Montalbano continues with us here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll have Sarah Montalbano back in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Back with more right after this.
Tune in Friday for our weekend entertainment and movie streaming review with our guest critic, Willie Waffle. That's actually his real name. Really? That's his real name? Man, his parents must have hated him. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now with Sarah Montalbano for Montalbano Mondays. Corey asked a valid question. She says, how many of these countries have already entered into agreements with the Canadian LNG? That's the Kitimat facility, right? I mean, how many of those have signed not just memorandums of understanding, but binding agreements? That's are you familiar with that, Sarah, with the big project there in Canada, or have you seen any of those numbers?
I'm familiar with it, but I don't know who's signed for the offtake on that. I think the numbers on that project look a little better than AKLNG, but I haven't gone into it in depth.
It's and it's interesting to see. We've been pushing for an Alaska gas line in this state I remember sitting in the office of a borough mayor who had a framed newspaper behind him on the wall. And it was the headline, and it said natural gas next year. And it was from 1957. Okay. Here in the state of Alaska. And I'm just like, okay, so I mean, that's great. But we've been promising, we've been thinking about this. The whole thing that got me was the agreement with Glenfarne was all contingent on the state paying upwards of, I think it was $50 million. They would pay the first $50 million of developmental costs, et cetera, et cetera. And my first question was, well, is this just a company that's going to go through the motions, burn up that $50 million, and then just say it's not doable? Mm-hmm. I mean, have you seen that kind of stuff before, Sarah?
Haven't we had something like this? I think this project, really started its permitting in 2013 or 14. So, it's already been, having difficulties getting off the ground here with, millions of dollars. But the way I see it is it's going to be a payoff that we can't really, it'll be hard to quantify how important it is to have a domestic in-state supply of natural gas, especially because imports might be cheaper today or in the next few years. But it really puts a ceiling on the natural gas costs if we have something domestic, because I don't think we can count that imports will always be cheaper, or that the U.S. will always be on friendly terms with the countries doing it for us. I think those are pretty big gambles from the national security standpoint. And I think the federal government's very interested in that.
Well, energy independence has always been one of Trump's stated goals, to make sure that we were a dominant supplier or whatever in the market, of not just supply, but being able to take care of ourselves as well. And we'll get into that here in the next segment when we return to the radio. But I want to talk a little bit about, the imported component, because I don't know how closely you were following this, because I know you were focused a lot on Minnesota, but the fact that we had these utilities that drug their feet for so long on whether or not they were going to import. They were like, we've got a crisis. We're going to come up with a plan. And it was like months later. And everybody's like, okay, what's the plan? And then, well, we're still working on it, And then finally, Chugach Electric pulled out of their little consortium of all the other ones and said, hey, screw it. We're just going to build an import facility, because that just, it makes sense. So, or we're going to take over the Marathon facility and convert it, or whatever that they did. And it was, this has been kind of an ongoing struggle. I want Alaska gas more than anything else, but Alaska gas at 2 or 3 times what we would pay for imported gas makes no sense at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that, and I think the rail-built utilities are really in a bind here. And if this project had been built a couple of years sooner, and permitting finished up, I think we'd be having a very different conversation today. Because I covered last year that the 5 rail-built utilities came together and they sent a letter to say basically we need to look at new hydro projects. Like we need reliable, affordable electricity, and we talked about that I think on
Right.
air too,
All right,
which is just crazy.
Hold on a second here. The timer, I've got 5 seconds. We're going to jump back into it, so don't go anywhere.
Sure.
Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Sarah Montalbano is our guest. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do it. Here we go.
Today's recipe is the important Alaskan news of the day with a dash of sardonic smile, a pinch of eye twinkle, not that you can see that on the radio, and a touch of acidity. It goes down easier like that. Don't question our recipes. The Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're continuing now. Sarah Montalbano, our guest, always on energy research is where she's at these days. And we were just talking during the break here about this problem and this conundrum with the idea of imports, because that's where we were all stuck. You know, you hit on it, Sarah. The tipping point was this gas shortage in the Cook Inlet, the South Central Rail Belt, the intertie, all those things. That was the biggest component of this. And you were just talking about how the big five utilities got together to try and solve this problem. Walk us through that real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. It was exciting to see last year because all the railroad utilities are starting to really be concerned about this natural gas shortage. They're expecting things to start hitting by 2027 or so. And so that's something that they need to deal with urgently. And last year, they all banded together and sent a letter saying that, well, we need to be looking at a new hydro project. You know, we need reliable, affordable electricity, which I thought was a really interesting turnabout from previous rhetoric. I think utilities have always known that they need these reliable baseload sources that'll be generating somewhat around the clock. And so that the fact that they think a hydro project can be built faster than some of these, imports, and they just have to go ahead and do some of these imports. But they've been talking about all of these different options to try and fill the gap. And I think natural gas is already supplying about 56% of Alaska's electricity, and about 50% of homes depend on it for home heating. And that will be expensive for a lot of people to retrofit or to, find alternatives to get off of natural gas if they need to. So I think there's a lot of points in favor of putting something on deck to get this natural gas, even if it's not built in time to cut off this shortage.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, those five utilities seem to dither for the longest time on what their plan was. And I know they talked about hydro and everything else, but then it was like crickets for the longest time. And then until Chugach Electric stepped out and said, we're just going to do our own thing at this point. And they just said, we need to import gas. Now, again, hopeful, but not optimistic. That's my stance on the gas line. I'm hopeful that it happens. I'm not optimistic, which leads us back to the problem of how do we fill it? Now, importing gas is the cheapest alternative at this point for everything that's going on. And there's been a real reticence to really even talk about it, except for people like Chugach, et cetera. But that's what's going on in the other parts of the world. They have to import it. They do what they have to do. What are your thoughts on the importation component of it?
I think it's good to have the infrastructure there, and I think that's the real viable alternative. I think you'll see a lot of people that are saying, well, we need to just build renewables faster. We need to do X, Y, Z. And I think that is, aside from all of the reliability issues with adding a bunch of intermittent resources to the system, even aside from that, I think, again, the fact that, 50% of Alaska homes are depending on natural gas for home heating, that's not going to be a cheap or easy retrofit for anybody. And that would land directly on homeowners if they need to start loosening their dependence on natural gas. So I think, we very much need to have those supplies, and imports are going to have to be how we do it, especially because I think the timeline on AKLNG is doable, but might be optimistic. And again, they're planning for, I think, first gas to be delivered in 2028, which is, as we know, the tail end of this federal administration. So I think if things start to slow down or don't proceed in a timely fashion here, we could be heading into a more hostile administration that doesn't want to see this project done.
Yeah.
And so I think they need to beat the clock on that too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Jeremy or it was Frank just said when the Trump administration is over, so is Alaska Gas. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, the Trump administration has been very bullish on Alaska, wants to get it done. But again, if the jerseys change and the other team gets in office, the next thing you know, all of that stuff could be reversed, stymied, roadblocked, everything else. So if something's going to get done, it has to get done now.
Mm-hmm. I agree entirely. And I think there's so much damaging about a permitting system that will just allow the flip-flops either way to just completely stymie millions and billions of dollars of investment. So I'm hopeful that Congress will get its act together a little bit here. I know that's kind of a funny sentence, but they're talking a lot about permitting reform and making it more certain for businesses and developers to get stuff like this done. So if they don't get it done before the midterms, though, I think we're not going to see it at all. And that would be a real disaster, I think. So lots of exciting stuff that needs to line up pretty well here to get this done.
You've been following, obviously, energy and all this stuff. A pipeline, I mean, you're essentially talking about delivering gas in 2.5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about here. Is that technologically, in your experience watching these things and watching these pipelines come about, is that technologically possible? Is it, do you think that they can get it done that fast because of some of the ease of, already on the right of way, already, known quantities, better technology, like you said, more expertise? Do you think that that's a realistic expectation?
I think it's feasible. I think it's still a little tight, but I think what really adds a lot to these processes is the federal permitting and the state permitting. And I think we have an unusual unison of all of those things right now that are lining up and that they want it to happen. So I think once the financing is figured out and out the door, I think they'll be able to do it pretty quickly. I think that's just the last piece of this that needs to come down into place.
And of course, it's all going to come down to, in the end, it's going to come down to cost. It's going to come down to, whether or not the federal government is going to step in with money and what the private side of the world will do, private equity and things like that. I mean, it would be great because, again, not only would we have gas for our own use, we would then have gas for export as well, which could help generate money in the state coffers to a variable, depending on what this legislature does. If they're going to offer some kind of tax incentives or royalty breaks or whatever else that they're talking about in the legislature, that would be the ultimate goal, to have that full-blown line for export, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm so curious about what's going to happen in the state legislature about this. I'm not directly involved in any of these discussions, but I'm a very eager observer because it's absolutely going to be a question of what can you do to make it happen here. But we also don't want to be trading off too much of Alaska's stake in this. Alaska stands to get a lot of taxes and a lot of GDP growth and all of that. So very curious how that balance is going to be struck.
Yeah, no, it's we don't want, we are resource owners, right? So we are the collective owners. So we don't, and it's a finite resource. So we don't want to lose our ability to generate some revenue from that and everything else. But we're going to have to see. And I don't know. I haven't heard yet what the legislature's doing. I know there's a lot of discussions going on. There's a lot of stuff floating around in the halls up there. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it is going to be the biggest thing that we're talking about. I think this legislative session for sure. It's going to be on the tips of everybody's tongue, especially with the gas shortage expected to hit next year. And that's going to be the tough one for sure. Now you mentioned hydro, and I want to sidebar for just a minute if you're willing to go with me on this. I know that you know renewables. This is a dirty word in some ways. Renewables have always been problematic because of the dispatchable power, meaning the constancy, the steadiness of power. The life cycles, that's a thing, except for the one renewable that's not, that doesn't suffer from a lot of these things is the hydro. And you just mentioned that the utilities were like, we really need to build more hydro in Alaska. I mean, I'm in agreement. What are you seeing with hydro, not just in Alaska, but across the country? I mean, we've seen, Hoover Dam, for example. I mean, it was built over 100 years ago, mega project, big monies, blah, 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 blah. But to this day, it still generates some of the cheapest power in the United States for all of California and everything. I mean, we've seen what can happen there. What do you think about more hydro here in Alaska and, comparatively to what you're seeing in the lower 48?
Yeah, I see a lot of consternation about hydro in the lower 48, especially in Washington. I think they had a difficulty with the Snake River Dam out there in Washington, and I don't recall if it was shut down. I think it was, and so there's a lot of you have these enormous capital costs for all the concrete. You build the dam, you do the environmental impact on the river, and then what they're doing is they're starting to back them up. And, to me, once the infrastructure is there, just keep it going until the end of its natural life. Your ratepayers have already paid for it. You've already impacted the environment. And so you should just go for it. And I think hydro is certainly worth considering in Alaska too. I think Kevin McCabe in the chat just mentioned the Susitna Dam, and that's the one that the Railbelt utilities were excited to talk more about and to kind of revive the idea of this. And I think that's a way to go. And I think we know how to do these things environmentally responsibly. We've come a long way. We're in 2026, and we have a lot of advanced technology to do this kind of thing. So I think it's worth considering. The other thing, though, which I think is even more renewable, is nuclear. And we've talked about nuclear a lot, and I think there's going to be a lot of promise once these pilot projects at Eielson for the small modular reactors get up and running, and we can see how this works for rural Alaska, because I think there's a lot of promise there.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I think that the nuclear card is one that we definitely should be playing. It's good to see what's happening at Eielson, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of those kind of projects. I mean, it was 15 years ago we were talking about Mitsubishi putting together, or Toshiba, I think it was Toshiba, putting together a nuclear battery and putting it out at Galena and testing it, and there was this whole fervor and everything else. I mean, it was 15 years ago, and the technology has done nothing but leapfrog over the last 15 years, and now we're finally going to see this first project, and it would be the way to help power the state, especially in a lot of these areas where they're remote and you have to barge fuel and everything else, where if you could just have a replaceable reactor that little micro trailer size thing gets trucked in and out every 30 or 40 years. I mean, it's not a bad deal.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so much that, needs to be considered with that. But I think the maintenance and just if these small modular reactors can just come in on a truck and be just wheeled out when the fuel is done, that's a huge advantage. And you can build it for a lot cheaper than, these giant nuclear projects that, were built in Georgia. Like, that ran over budget. Of course it did. And that's just kind of how the big ones go. But if we have the smaller ones settled out, and I think, again, that's a priority of this federal administration too, is getting these small modular reactors approved on their designs and moved through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as quickly as reasonably and safely possible, so they can get towards production.
I'd love to see it. Love to see it. All right, we're going to continue here with Sarah Montalbano in just a moment. We're up against the next break already. We're going to be back with more. It's the fastest 2 hours in radio, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now. We return in this many times right here. So we're going to be back here in just a moment with that. Meanwhile, Sarah Montalbano is our guest. And we're going back through this. Resources need transportation to get to market and to refiners, etc. Also need customers. PFD does not. If not for the resources, we would not have had a PFD for the last 3 decades. That's a response to something else that I missed, apparently. Lots of stranded, lots of gas stranded in the Arctic. And I'm looking here. Harold makes a comment that again echoes some of my concerns about this. He says once the financing comes in, he goes, what financing? Even with federal subsidies, investors will not choose the weak ROI of any Alaska gas development. And I don't know, did you see the Wood Mackenzie report, Sarah? Did you take a look at that?
Yeah, a while ago. I think their assumptions might be a little optimistic.
Yeah, well, there was one, especially the one that got touted around was there were several scenarios in there. I think 3 different scenarios, but the one that got touted around a lot was the one that really concerned me because even with an 80% subsidy, it was still delivering gas at something like $3 over market value,
Wow.
which I mean, that's a lot, even with an 80%. So, I mean, I'm with you on I want it to happen, but I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, if the Fed is going to pump $100 billion into it, okay, maybe, if it's a full, but I just don't know how otherwise how that makes the cut in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it would need to be substantial support to really make it happen. So I don't know. I'm in the same observational boat as the rest of you, and I love seeing the arguments in the chat. It's fun to watch that I've got an opinion, and now there's a lot of feelings about my opinion here.
Yeah,
many controversial opinions here.
Well, yeah,
it's fun.
I think, was it Florida's been using nuclear reactors for years, hasn't been any environmental disaster. They've proved to work. And what we're talking about is not even reactors. These are essentially self-contained units. Harold says folks can't even maintain regular dynamos. Portable nuclear would be a complete environmental. Again, they're self-contained units. You're not working on them. All you're doing is plugging them into the grid and they run for however long they do until they run out of juice. And then you swap it out. It's a modular, essentially nuclear battery, right? That's what they're talking about, right, Sarah?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, it is not the same kind of technology that's going into the big, conventional nuclear stacks. So, it's very different. It's self-contained. There are units that are being designed that don't even have, openings in order to do maintenance. The idea is just we'll put it in, plug it in, and take it out when the fuel's done. And I think that's maybe the first way that it's going to go for this, because honestly, I don't think Alaska will have the, knowledge base of nuclear technicians, to do the maintenance on this stuff. It needs to be first, can we make it work, prove it, and then get some, education to follow it and, make it a viable career path for people. And then we can start doing, more interesting things.
Kind of a set it and forget it. I'm getting corrected here by Rob Myers.
Oh, good.
He says the WoodMac study has no subsidy. Gas at phase 1 was higher than current cost, but roughly equivalent to imports. I swear I saw, if it wasn't WoodMac, who was it? There was another study that had a subs. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Thank
it's
you.
been a long time since I've looked at it. Yeah, but Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's all good. The Eielson reactor, says Rob, also was supposed to be operational in 2027. Now we're hoping they start construction by 2027. I mean, fingers crossed we can get any of that done. I mean, that's the thing, Sarah, and you've seen this argument and this battle over energy across the country, and it seems like it was the NSTAR study that had the 80% subsidy. Thank you, Rob. You've seen this battle across the country, but it just seems like we're always behind the power curve on this. It's like almost like energy has become an afterthought, but that's the cornerstone of civilization is cheap, affordable energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's our mission, at Always On Energy Research too, to promote this. We need reliable, affordable energy and electricity. And I really think that we will benefit a lot in Alaska from having more of this, especially because I don't think imports are going to be cheaper forever. And I don't think even this Wood Mackenzie study, if they're equivalent, then I think they're likely to rise in the future. I think that if we build a gas line, we're putting a ceiling on costs for Alaskans for many decades to come, for as long as it's using gas. So
yeah, no, if you locked it in with a local pipeline and it was equivalent to imports, then you're basically shielding yourself from any future raise in imports. That's the bottom line. All right, here we go. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, Sarah Montalbano is with us. It's just fun to say that. We're back. Montalbano Mondays is what we like to do it. That's also the name of her Substack. I don't know where she got that moniker, but it's good. You can go out and read her on Substack.com. Sarah, you've been watching. Just let's step back from just Alaska's need here on this gas pipeline. You've been watching this whole argument over the energy grid, and we were just talking about how electricity is essentially the cornerstone of civilization, but we seem to be treating it in many ways like an afterthought, right? I mean, it's like every time we talk about it, it's we'll do this, we'll do that. The whole renewable thing. The Green Dream article that you wrote, Shattered Green Dreams, talking about how there's not enough dispatchable power on this stuff, and how some states, like the Midwest and Minnesota and things like that, are going to be facing some severe crises based on their decisions. We should be able to learn from this, shouldn't we?
Absolutely. And I think utility operators and the grid operators are really understanding that now, especially with data centers coming to the forefront here, especially in the lower 48. As a preview of today's Substack, it'll go out in an hour or two, but I'm going to be talking about the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, and their most recent long-term reliability assessment. And they're finding that like half of the U.S. grid is going to be at a high risk of shortfalls in the next, 10 years, under normal peak conditions. Peak conditions being, everyone's coming home from work, they turn on their lights, they set the dishwasher, those are kind of normal conditions. Winter Storm Fern, that's an extreme condition, right? And we were lucky to avoid some blackouts on that. And that's scary. When this grid monitor is sounding the alarm for most of North America, I think that's something Alaska needs to take seriously, especially because Alaska doesn't have any, overarching grid monitor like this. No one's telling Alaska that, hey, you need to be building more, reliable dispatchable power. And so, NERC talks a lot about it. They mince words pretty carefully, but they talk about, you have to be carefully managing generator retirements. And what that means in non-grid speak is that you need to be slowing down your retirements of fossil fuels because you don't have the dispatchable power to replace it.
Yeah, and again, this latest storm really, I think you wrote something here a couple weeks ago or anyway, you were mentioning this storm just accelerated the crisis that was in the Midwest because they were already facing, they've started to retire a lot of their dispatchable power generation. They're relying more and more on these renewables and everything else. And then all of a sudden, a storm like this comes on and it creates a massive problem. I mean, not just in the Midwest. I mean, in Florida, people are trying to figure out how to heat their homes, right, at 25 degrees and things like that. And they're not built for that. There's more power going on there. Or it could be a Texas heat wave, or it could be whatever that Mother Nature throws at us.
Mhm.
It seems like most of these reports and most of these analyses are betting on kind of best case scenarios instead of the absolute worst case.
Yeah, it's really scary that you mentioned that because one of the lines for the PJM interconnection, that's the grid that serves a lot of customers, like 67 million or something, in the kind of East Coast and Midwest. And there's a line in NERC's report that says basically you need very good performance from both your fossil fuels and your renewables in order to avert shortfalls. And we can't actually count on very good performance from an intermittent source that when the sun goes down and the wind is still, you don't have as much as you want from them during winter storms like this. And so they're warning about this. They're talking about it very explicitly, and utilities are listening. And I think what we're seeing is they're starting to pull back on their generator retirements. I think there's 10 gigawatts of energy that was supposed to be retired last year that wasn't, which is a very positive thing. But they need to be taking the cues from the federal administration too, that they want to have more of this coal remaining online. They're rescinding regulations in order to make it happen. And so utilities need to be preparing for that wherever their states will let them. There's a lot of states, bluer states have high rates. That's one of Always On Energy Research's recent reports. And there's a lot of states that are pulling in these portfolio standards that don't allow coal to stay on the grid, that are making natural gas more expensive to build for environmental reasons. So all of this, I think, goes out the window when there's reliability needs like Winter Storm Fern. And I think we need to be building for those kind of peak scenarios and not thinking that everything's going to go well all the time.
And Alaska, I mean, we're unique in the fact you mentioned coal. I mean, we're unique in the fact that we have this bismuth coal instead of anthracite coal. It's some of the cleanest coal that they have in the world. And we have this opportunity. We have a huge supply. And yet even here in this state, we're seeing, this discussion. They want to shut down Healy plant. They want to do, all these other things. And it's all it's not due to feasibility. It's not due to, reliability. It's all due to regulation at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, what needs to happen for ratepayers is they need to be reevaluating any coal closures and really asking, is this in the ratepayers' best interest? Because a lot of utilities have been fine with this kind of green push, because what that means is they have to build a bunch of new wind and solar, and then they can rate base that. So they get those payments back from the ratepayer. And because you need so much of it, that increases their profitability a lot. And you don't make money on a coal plant that's already been paid off. You built it a long time ago and your ratepayers just get electricity from it and you aren't making money. So I think a lot of it needs to be about the reliability right now. You need to be looking to pause retirements or roll them back or push them back, whatever you can do. And I think the utilities know that. They really do want to just run a good grid that isn't going to cause problems for people.
Rob Myers just said in the chat room, he said that we're currently standing up a grid reliability organization here in Alaska, and it should be completely operational by next year. Tell me about the importance of having something like that, a grid reliability organization. What does that mean for the state?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially for Alaska, because, NERC as a grid reliability organization, they're sending out the warnings and they're, coordinating with all of the regional grids to point out what they need and stuff like that. And on the other hand, it is a little more of just it's another non-governmental but bureaucratic organization. So in that sense, I'm not a fan, but I think it really is important to coordinate more with the grid because we have, 5 railway utilities and a bunch of really small local grids that we really do just need more information and more thinking about. So I think that's really welcome news.
No, I mean, I think it would be good, especially if somebody's on the outside looking in and going, okay, that works, that works. Oop, that doesn't, and that's going to be a problem until, because again, what we heard was, oh, by the way, we're going to have a gas shortage and we're working on it. And then it was crickets for how long, right? And everybody's wondering what's going to happen, what's going to go on until finally one of the utilities said, we're just going to do it on our own because nobody, again, people were just kind of getting baked in a squat and we're getting squeezed. I mean, Corey just said in the, in Fairbanks, taking GVA as an example, they aren't able to focus on future energy simply because they can't afford to maintain what they already have without continuing to increase the customer cost. People already can't afford those. I mean, I just heard that again, they want to increase another rate increase in Fairbanks. Down here on HEA, Homer Electric, which covers most of the peninsula, I mean, we're same thing. We've already seen they're already talking about another rate increase, and we're spending a lot of money. We've got to find a way to make that affordable for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all of these rate increases, they're coming because the cake is baked, the infrastructure is built. And that's the difficult part is we need to stretch this to last as long as it can reliably because we can't afford necessarily to keep building a bunch of intermittent resources that aren't going to matter for reliability. If you are spending money on grid improvements, you need to be doing it for the long term and the dispatchable term. It really is unfortunate to see all of this. I noticed Golden Valley Electric was after the cold snap you all had, was posting a lot on Facebook about here's why our rates are going up. We're trying to, explain this to people.
Right.
But it's not unique to Golden Valley. There's a lot of consternation about rates right now everywhere.
Everywhere, but here in Alaska, because we're paying more than most places in the U.S. for electricity. God forbid you start talking about some of the villages where their costs are, into the 50 cents a kilowatt hour kind of thing. I mean, it's pretty crazy. About 90 seconds here, Sarah. What else are you working on? What should people come out and look for on Substack to find you out there? What are you going to be working on?
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, today is going to be all about the lower 48 grid and its reliability assessments for Montalbano Monday. Stay tuned. I've stepped up my involvement with Independent Women's Center for Energy and Conservation, so keep looking out for me there. And on Substack, you'll probably see more about Colorado because I'm also doing some work with the Independence Institute out there in Colorado. And boy, I thought Minnesota was bad, but Colorado is bad. It's a great time. So I hope you'll subscribe, and I hope I'll be back here very soon to talk more about it.
That's right. You'll find her over on Substack, Montalbano Mondays. Sarah Montalbano, our guest. Thanks so much, as always. It's great to talk with you. The hour goes too fast. Thank you for being part of it today.
Thank you.
If Rick says Sarah needs to come on more often. She's got a life. I mean, geez. All right, hold the line, Sarah. Folks, back with more Hour 2 dead ahead right after this. I mean, she's got things to do, but everybody says that all the time. Every time you're on, they're like, "Oh, she needs to come on more often."
I think that's very sweet.
Anything else you want to hit us with, Sarah? What's anything else going on that you want to share with us? Are you staying warm?
Yeah. Florida, we actually had flurries here
I know.
last weekend. It was crazy. First time since like the 80s, apparently.
My daughter lives down there in Florida, and at one point it was 41 degrees here and it was 28 degrees there, and I'm just like, suck it. I mean, it was, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Still can't get away. But I mean, that's really a shock to folks down there, isn't it? I mean, you're used to that coming from up here, but I mean, that's a shock for folks down there, right?
Oh yeah, but you're seeing people bundled up walking their dogs, it's just it was mostly the wind, and I'm starting to feel it too. I'm getting less acclimated. I was up home for Christmas, and I was thinking, boy, it's cold. This is
Right.
awful.
Right.
So my blood's thinning, and all the people down here have thin blood too. So
Yeah. Well, that even happens here in Alaska. I go up to Fairbanks for a couple days, and I'm like, what? Oh, this is why I left Fairbanks. It's like I remember that. I gets to be 15 or 20 below, and I start to question my sanity. But
Mhm.
yeah, this power thing. I get so frustrated because again, it is, and I keep going back to it, but it is the cornerstone of everything we do. If we had
Absolutely.
cheap, affordable energy, life in this state would be so much easier for so many people.
Mhm.
But we keep making these decisions like GVEA. For years, they spent millions, they sunk millions of dollars into their wind project. They sunk millions of dollars into that thing. And even when somebody else built it and offered to tap into the grid, they fought against that and everything else. It's just, it's getting to the point to where it's just kind of crazy. And the fact that there's a lot of, I guess I would say, infiltration into the boards of these different utilities by people who have an environmental agenda that they want to stop all traditional forms of power, dispatchable power. And that I think is the one that really bugs me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm building a data set that will kind of look at some of the costs of individual generator and plant projects. So stay tuned for that, because I want to look at some of these wind projects and solar projects in Alaska, because I think if we actually look at what they were reported to have capacity to do versus what they're actually generating, my hunch is that it's going to be a lot less, and the payoff's going to be a lot worse for the ratepayer. And absolutely, the boards are kind of crazy around here. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And you have a lot of interests that I was a solar developer and now I'm on this board, and so you clearly have a perspective. And
Right.
there's not
Right.
enough consumer protection for the ratepayer.
Yeah.
That's my feeling on it.
Well, it's
Mhm.
all you have to do is look at the election time when it comes to the boards and see that there's no interest, hardly any interest. They don't, but you don't realize how important that is to the rest of your life. But people just don't pay attention to it. The same
Yeah.
incumbents get elected over and over and over again because nobody else runs. And, and again, you get people there that have a specific viewpoint where they want to push something like renewables when it doesn't make sense, especially in Alaska, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a great thing. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go. I know you're a busy lady. I can't wait to see your next Montalbano Monday. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming on board. It's always great to talk with you. Appreciate
Oh,
you
it's
being
great to be here. Yeah,
here.
thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Sarah Montalbano, our guest, Montalbano Mondays on Substack. If you want, I put the link to the latest article there in the chat room, but I'll put it in there one more time. And she can do those. We're gonna do it. All right. Well, let's get back to it. You guys ready to dive into this thing with this Commonwealth North? Oh man, I can't wait. We're gonna dissect this. Something a little different than what we've been doing, and than what we've done in the past in some of our press conferences. I'm still working on cutting up that Senate press conference from last week. I haven't finished that, but this I put it aside, quite honestly, because of this Commonwealth North thing, because the commentary here was just too much, too much. And we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. Anyway, how was your weekend? How was your weekend? Terry says Sarah needs to come back up to Alaska to get her blood thickened. Yeah. Chris said we had cheap gas here in the Kenai, then they sold it all to the Japanese and let us freeze. Yeah, I mean, the worst part about that whole thing was that there was a great opportunity to expand the infrastructure here on the Kenai, and that kind of slipped on by to build it out even more than it is right now. That's the But that's a great thing. What was that? They're pre-collecting the rate increase. Is that what you said, Frank? Whoa. Rick says our power bills and people on natural gas bill are getting bad. What happens when it gets to the point where some can't pay? Winters are tough here when you pay for power. I mean, I agree. It's even worse in Fairbanks, Rick. I hate to tell you that, but it's even worse in Fairbanks because most of them don't have natural gas and it's heating oil, and their electricity bills are much higher than the Valley. So times is tough all over. All right, we got to get going. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Back with more.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends, and good morning to you. How you doing? Hour 2 of the big radio show. Fastest 2 hours in radio, man. It just goes just so quick. We just finished up with Sarah Montalbano, who was our guest in the last hour. Sarah joining us talking about the latest on the AKLNG project, plus more discussions on gas and electric, the grid, nuclear, coal, hydro. We talked about it all. If you missed any of it, you can go back and listen to it on the podcast, which is available wherever you find podcasts, including my favorite, Spotify. I listen to all my podcasts on Spotify. You can find it all there and more. Just go back and take a listen to it. And we'll be posting that up here later today right after the show. We'll be posting it right after the show. I've seen a lot of people commenting this morning that all the new tax assessments are out and increases across the board. That's what I'm seeing, increases across the board. It's not just Anchorage. It's not just Fairbanks. It's not just the peninsula. It's pretty much everywhere. Everything's going up, baby. You guys are all going to have to pay. Well, us guys, me too, are all going to have to pay. Hour 2 of the program today, and I want to do something a little different. Well, I mean, it's been different. I said last week that there was a press conference on, I guess, Wednesday or Thursday of last week, and I said I was going to get to it and cut up that press conference and I started to work on that, and then I got an email from a friend of mine who said, "Oh, hey, are you going to be watching the Commonwealth North forum this week?" And I'm like, "No, what for?" They sent me the link. This Commonwealth North forum, and it was a forum that included Senator Cathy Geissel, Senator James Kaufman, and former Senator Natasha von Imhof. And it was kind of a state of the state. Where are we going? What are we facing? What are going to be what's the money? What's the haps? And everything else. And so I watched this thing. and and I just got to say, it was one of the most eye-opening behind the scenes look at where at what our legislative, I get, not just because von Imhof's a former senator, but I think again she's part of that elite group that is trying to lead the state in one way or the other. And I thought, you know what, I was starting to take some clips out and everything else, but I decided what I really want to do is I really want to play, because each of them spoke for about 15 minutes or so, a little bit less. And I want you to be able to hear with my commentary everything that was said. Now I'm only going to play because Kaufman was a stand-in. I can't remember who was supposed to be there. Somebody else was supposed to be there, and he got called in at the last minute. So his commentary was pretty innocuous. But Geissel and von Imhof, between the two of them, it's eye-opening for them to say, just eye-opening. All right. So I want to get started. I want to get started on this because this is going to take the whole hour. But I want you to be able to hear some of these things. And there are some doozies in here. So they start off the conversation with State Senator Cathy Geissel. And I just want you to hear kind of the mindset of where we're going. And these, again, are leaders in our state, people who are influential, who are the elites, who are the movers and shakers. And we're just gonna kick it off here. This was Cathy Geissel at the Commonwealth North Forum last week.
We have been handed, as you might say, a very large gas pipeline mega project. It's a unique mega project, very different than the ExxonMobil-led project in the teens, about 2014 to 2017 or so. So this one is going to be a very, very challenging navigation to make sure that we've got the policies in place, that Alaskans are receiving the maximum benefit from the resources.
Which that was like the first thing that caught me when she said that. This is the first time I think I've ever heard her talk about Alaska, trying to quote the Constitution, Alaskans receiving the maximum benefit for their resources. That's the first time we've ever heard, I think, those words come out of her mouth. But maybe I'm wrong. But that little phrase just caught me on the way through.
Are receiving the maximum benefit from the resources that they should be. The second big lift is the Rural Health Transformation Project. Now, this is federal money, $272 million for the first year and subsequent years, possibly, depending on how well we deploy this money. But it is on extremely short time frame. And so our Department of Health is scrambling. We are concerned to making sure that they have the capacity that they need to actually execute the distribution of all this money, and that the projects that are begun are sustainable, so that when this money is gone in about 5 years, we have transformational projects in place that can sustain themselves.
I don't know if you just caught that. I don't know what you just, because everybody's talking about, this big tranche of money, this 1.5 billion, whatever it is, $270 million a year. We need to create first of all, we need to be able to make sure we can spend all this money, was what she said. We want to make sure that and then we need to create programs that are sustainable so that when this money runs out, $270 million a year, when this money runs out, that they are sustainable and we can pick up the tab. That's essentially what she's saying.
To making sure that they have the capacity that they need to actually execute the distribution of all this money, and that the projects that are begun are sustainable, so that when this money is gone in about 5 years, we have transformational projects in place that can sustain themselves. So it's a challenge.
It's a challenge. So they can sustain themselves. $270 million a year. Even if we're able to sustain it at half that, it's an additional $125 to $150 million a year. Just Just mark that on your to-do list. Mark that on there.
But at the end of the day, our main responsibility is passing a funded budget. That is in our Constitution. So the budget is always the main topic for me, despite the fact that for 10 years now, I've chaired the Resources Committee. It has been in the past, oil and gas have been the main source of our revenue. That's changed. I also am a healthcare provider, so healthcare matters a lot to me. And I also began a special committee on Arctic affairs. We are an Arctic circumpolar member of the Arctic, and there are special issues. We all know Alaska's different. But going to the budget, on the screen, I believe Ross has displayed a graphic. And this graphic demonstrates where our main source of revenue is coming from. That tall building on the left, which sort of looks like the Atwood building to me, represents the Permanent Fund Corporation and the Permanent Fund itself. So just a reminder, I know that a lot of Commonwealth members have been longtime Alaskans, but just to remind you, it was 1976, the November election, when the people of Alaska said, we need to save some money. We had just had a massive lease sale the few years previous, brought in $900 million, and we thought, whoa, we've got it made. At that time, our budget was about $250 million. It was under 300 million that year.
157 million that year. Right, Rob? That was the number, right? 157 million that year that we got the $900 million payment. But I mean, Alaskans, and again, under the auspices of Jay Hammond, who said, whoa, you guys just burned through $1 billion. Yeah, they voted that.
So we were pretty excited, but the money was spent very quickly. And Alaskans said, no, this oil is not going to last forever. So they created the Permanent Fund itself. And today, that fund is our major source of revenue. Just short of $4 billion are coming out of that fund to spend. We established a spending cap in 2018 called the percent of market value.
Okay. Now they're calling the percent of market value. See where the phrasing is going with this? See where the phrasing, percent of market value was never sold as a cap. It was sold as a way to protect the fund and to inflation-proof the fund and to keep from overdrawing the fund in that regard. It was never sold as a this is where the language is going to come in, folks. It's a spending cap. Now the POMV formula is a spending cap.
We established a spending cap in 2018 called the percent of market value. And that's what limits the amount of money that we can spend out of the earnings from that fund. These are critical facts that Alaskans should be aware of. The second graphic there says federal revenue. So that's a smaller graphic, isn't it? This federal revenue used to be larger than our investment earnings, but the federal government has been cutting back, right? They've cut back our SNAP, our supplemental nutrition funding. They've reduced our Medicaid funding. That has shrunk that federal piece. Then we have petroleum. Petroleum used to be 80 to 90% of our revenue. It is not anymore. You see 13% there. And then the other revenue, gas taxes, communication taxes, things like that. We have tourism, fisheries, mining, and then timber is very small. Next slide, please. This is a big source of revenue that we need to be preserving. There we go. You can see it even more graphically. There's the investment earning. 60% of our money is coming out of the permanent fund. So this is a big source of revenue that we need to be preserving. The constitutional amendment that is being proposed would actually preserve this fund and accelerate the savings in it.
Okay, a little Freudian slip there. Okay, it's going to preserve the fund by combining the corpus and the earnings reserve. That is somehow going to preserve the fund, when they then have access and it busts the constitutional bar on spending the corpus of the fund, that somehow is going to create another bar. It's going to prevent them from doing it. But then you get that Freudian slip, the Freudian slip that she lays out there.
Accelerate the savings in it.
Accelerate the spending in it. Folks, out of the mouth speaks the heart. And I know you're picking on her. You know, everybody you misspeak. I know. But when you're looking at this and it's just too juicy to say, you know, oh, we're going to combine the funds, that's going to protect it, but it's going to accelerate the spending. I mean, that's what it's coming down to here.
Accelerate the savings in it and limit our spending really strictly. And so I would encourage folks that are listening to really look into the constitutional amendment that has been offered by the legislature. There's a version of it in the House and in the Senate. To put a further point on it, the governor has offered a constitutional amendment also that partially mirrors what's in the legislature. The piece in it, however, that puts the permanent fund dividend in the Constitution causes a majority of us in the Senate a great deal of concern. It would put mandatory spending in our Constitution. And so there is extremely limited support for that.
Yeah, so there's extremely limited support for that because it's spending that would be out of their control. They don't want that. It gets even better, my friends. This whole thing gets even better. We'll continue with this. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. But, I mean, Frank just says it all. Limit our spending, quote unquote. History does not agree with that statement. I mean, right? Right? Oh, this is going to limit our spending. If we combine these funds, we guarantee you then we'll live within our means. We guarantee you that if you do that, then we'll live within our means. There's no guarantee for that. There's no guarantee for that at all. Fed may require, says Ben Carpenter, Fed may require that it gets spent, not invested, but, quote, create funds that sustain spending, create programs, rather, that sustain spending, unquote, is code for a PCE or ed-like fund structure. That's what I'm talking about. She's talking about $270 million a year for potentially the next 5 years. And then she's talking about, oh, well, I'm going to, we need to make sure that the program is sustainable and can be picked up when the money, they're already acknowledging that this is a limited time funding. This is not being spent on one-time items. It's standing up programs that you and I will be required to pay for down the road. I mean, she's in healthcare. This is like her Jubilee moment. Oh, yeah, it's so great. She'll be able to create programs that you then later on will have to pay for over and over and over again after that whole thing's done.
We established a spending cap.
Nope, not that one. Where is it? Here it is.
Just to remind you, it was 1976.
No.
To make sure that we've got the policies in place.
There we go.
That Alaskans are receiving the benefit, the maximum benefit from the resources that they should be.
So anyway, we're going to, this whole thing just keeps going on and on and on about the spend and the spend. Don't trust us. We're going to get it right this time. We're going to do it. It's all going to be fine. It's just it's just crazy. Yeah, but we don't want to promise a dividend to Alaska residents. They don't want to put that spending in the Constitution because it takes it out of their hands. Because they know better than you how to spend your money. That's the bottom line. They know better than you how this money should be spent. And by golly, it gets even worse in this later on. But this is where we're at right now. I mean, this mind-boggling where we're at here. But it doesn't get better, folks. This is the peak. This is the peak under the hood that you needed to see what the mindset is of most of the legislators, especially in the Senate. Because this is kind of what you're seeing here is kind of the philosophy of what's going on in the Senate right now, in the state Senate. Yeah, the RHTP, the Rural Healthcare Transformation Fund, or whatever it is payoff for shrinking Medicaid. But again, the problem is that it's a bridge. It's not a full, it doesn't take care of it into perpetuity. It's only a short term. It's basically supposed to soften the blow. And what they're going to do is they're going to use it to expand the programs and then end up costing us more in the end. And remember when she talked about those SNAP benefits and the SNAP benefits and the Medicaid cuts, because that's coming back. That's going to circle back around here in a minute, and you're going to see the payoff on that here in just a few minutes. This is a deal. All right, we're 10 seconds out. We're about ready to rejoin. Please like and share, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube and the all the things. And let's get more people involved in this. But I want you to hear this. I want you to pay close attention to what comes next. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay, we're continuing now. This is from the Commonwealth North Forum last week. Cathy Geissel is speaking, talking about her philosophy and where the legislature's going and everything else. And things is about to get real, folks. We just left off talking about the Rural Transformation Fund and how they've got to protect the permanent fund. They've got to combine it to protect it so that then they can spend it. And she continues.
Remember that the dividend was not a vote of the people. It is not in our Constitution.
She wants to make sure you know the people did not vote for the dividend. They did not. This was a legislative action. It's not in the Constitution. She wants to make that point.
Remember that the dividend was not a vote of the people. It is not in our Constitution. It was a statutory item done by a vote of the legislature, and it was a close vote at that. At that time, in addition, we eliminated our income tax. We eliminated our education head tax. And so we find ourselves today dealing with that question. We need new revenue. Right now, we're facing a deficit. This year's budget that the governor has proposed is a $1.5 billion deficit. Now, a major part of that is he's calling for spending about half, actually more than half, of the money coming out of the permanent fund this year on dividends. I like to highlight for people what the dividend actually costs. This last October.
Okay. First of all, going back to her whole comment about the people voting, there was a vote in 2000 about this on the permanent fund. That was the first POMV attempt. And 82% of Alaskans said don't touch it. 82%. So if you're looking for some kind of mandator to show that the people didn't care, here's your sign. 82% said leave it as it is. Now she's going to get into it with us and tell us why the dividend costs us money. Now, regardless of the fact that the dividend is fully funded, fully paid for, it is the earnings of our money. But she's going to tell you exactly how much it costs.
I like to highlight for people what the dividend actually costs. This last October, so just a few months ago, we distributed a permanent fund dividend that cost $685 million. $685 million. Now, that's a lot of money. And we have a lot of needs that pieces of that $685 million could actually fund.
I want you to hear that again. That's a lot of money. And we have things that we have needs, not wants, but needs that we could use that money for.
That's a lot of money. And we have a lot of needs that pieces of that $685 million could actually fund. Let's think about SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Program, or Medicaid. They could use part of that money. We could use part of that money and actually fully fund those, backfilling it with state money.
So again, she wants to take your dividend, 600. That's not the other part of the dividend. That's the $1,000 that we got last year. The 685 million is what's left of the dividend. After they've taken everything else, it's what's left. And she's saying, oh, we could spend it on SNAP. We could spend it on food stamps. We could spend it on Medicaid, all those things. Much higher, better use of the money than giving it to you. Yes, then that 685 million being injected into the private economy. Instead, it needs to be given to government.
So it's really time for citizens to think about where that dividend could possibly make its biggest impact.
Oh, well, I know what ICER said. ICER said the dividend made the biggest impact when it was given to the people. Milton Friedman said the same thing back in the day. But here it is. People really need to think about again, this is a version of it's time for you to pay your fair share. That's what this is. This is a direct version of it's time for you to pay your fair share.
They could use part of that money. We could use part of that money and actually fully fund those, backfilling it with state money. So it's really time for citizens to think about where that dividend could possibly make its biggest impact. Now, a lot of people say yes, but there's a lot of people who are low income and they really depend on that dividend. Actually, I would argue that those folks actually really depend on having Medicaid there, available, dependable. They depend on food stamps to be there to assist them in feeding their family. They depend on housing subsidies.
This is her version of let them eat cake. This really affects the lower. And, I know Brad constantly focuses on the lowest income families. But who also gets squeezed? All those middle income folks who don't have access to any of those programs. That's assuming that those programs that she just talked about are all super efficient and they're the best use of the dollars and they're done well and everything else. But that does nothing for middle income Alaskans who are getting squeezed from both sides. They don't participate in the crony capitalism. They're not up in the leadership, the top, 80%, 70, 80%, where they're getting monies and somehow their money's directly affected by government spend. And they're not in the lower 20 or 30% where people have access to these programs like Medicaid and SNAP and welfare and housing benefits and everything else. And so they're the ones that are losing, 7, 8, 9, 10% of their income every year because of this. I mean, come on.
Actually, they're available, dependable.
So
they depend on housing subsidies, again, to have shelter. So there's a lot of, we need to have a serious discussion about the dividend. when the dividend was first instituted, it started in 1982, and that first check was $1,000. But the next year, the check was $386. $386 dividend the next year. It was 11 years later before the dividend was over $1,000 again.
So you guys should just be grateful. You guys should just be grateful, regardless of the fact that $1,000 in 1980 was, or $300 in the subsequent years, for inflation and everything else was about, $2,000 or something. So, but you should just be grateful for what you're getting. You just should be grateful for what you're getting on it.
So, we managed to build the Trans-Alaska Pipeline when we had an income tax, an education head tax, and no dividend. We had a population here.
That's foreshadowing. That's foreshadowing. We managed to build a pipeline when we had an income tax, an educational head tax, and no dividend. In her ideal, that's ideal in her world. That's ideal in her world. Head tax, education tax, income tax, no dividend, and we managed to build a pipeline.
We had a population here that was ready for a mega project. A lot of workers came in from outside, which we anticipate happening if this gas pipeline goes forward. But we had public safety in place. We had education function.
Blah, 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 blah. Next.
Our constitutional budget reserve is our savings account. It is shrinking also. And I know Senator Kaufman will talk about that. We have a supplemental budget or supplemental request this year from the governor of about $450.
She goes on to talk about that. $450 million for supplemental budgets for the
because a lot of us
we'll just
believe
go over here.
that savings account, that constitutional budget reserve, is there for emergencies.
I clipped this part. I tagged this part because, again, we believe that the CBR is there for emergencies, or if we don't want to cut our budgets, because we spent out of it for years. We spent out of it for years. I mean, she was there. She was there. We only want to use it when it's an emergency, but we spent out of it for 3 years and drained it, plus the CBR, plus the SBR, plus everything else. This is what it comes down to.
Revenue comes in, they pull money out of that CBR, then put it back in. As we lower that constitutional budget reserve, we're reducing our cash flow. Right now, the constitutional budget reserve is about $3.3 billion. So we'd be taking $425 million out of it. That would drop it down below the $3 billion mark. I know that former Senator Natasha von Imhof can certainly speak to that. She had huge concerns about that savings account, that constitutional budget reserve. So, really, I'm kind of laying out some things here that I know that Senator Kaufman and former Senator von Imhof are going to go into much more depth. But I just want to paint the picture of where our revenue comes from.
So here's this is her final take before we go. We're about to go to break. We're not even going to get through all of Natasha's stuff today, but we're going to go to break. And, but before we do that, this is the final piece where she's going to use that false argument, that false equivalency, that if we paid a full PFD, look at all these, we would have to gut the government to pay a full PFD.
This is my last slide, and then I will close. I'll turn it over to Senator Kaufman. But on this slide, you can see what our budget looks like. The red bars are the fiscal year we're in right now. The blue bars are what the governor is proposing for the coming year. That first set of bars on the left, that's the dividend. Those are the dividend bars. So you see, we spent about $685 million there on that red bar. He's proposing spending 2.3 billion approximately. You can see it's a huge amount. In fact, it's an increase of 1.68 billion. To cover that increase, those departments, starting on the right, moving over to the left, that are in bright yellow, all of those departments would have to be completely eliminated to fill that $1.68 billion gap that you see there, to pay what is called a full dividend.
A full.
So I want to emphasize this is
the disdain.
to pay what is called a full dividend.
To pay what is called a full dividend. You'd have to eliminate all of the government
to pay what is called a full dividend. So I want to emphasize this is the impact of the dividend. We need to have a serious discussion. Alaskans need to think long and hard about what role the dividend plays in our economy.
So that was it. That, I mean, again, the dividend, evil. The whole premise of this entire thing was dividend evil. We could spend it so much better than you, and we'd have to eliminate all of government if we were going to pay the full dividend. I mean, this is it. And they were eating it up. I asked some questions at the end. They never answered. They never asked my question. I don't know why. We're going to be back. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay. Dang, that took longer than I expected. Bear with me here. I'm gonna jump some cuts here.
And so I'm not in the daily minutia.
I'm gonna try, because I've got these things marked out, but I'm not gonna let it play so far in between.
And the big elephant in the room that was never addressed, which is, I'm talking about criminalizing. Here's all the spending, but here's where we stand with the rest of the. My opinion, I don't think the state.
Okay. All right. So we're going to see if we can bust through this. We might have to come back to this tomorrow after Brad. We might have to take the two segments after Brad and go over the stuff with Natasha, because you think Cathy's stuff is shocking. Natasha's is even worse. Natasha. It's even worse. It is a blatant it's a blatant PFD grab. That's exactly what it is. They are justifying their actions. They are telegraphing to you their actions on the permanent fund dividend, where they're going, what their thought process is, and what they want to do. Again, Cathy, 685 million. Just think about what we could spend that on. Just think about what we could spend that on. I mean, hello. This is some crazy chiz, folks. You guys, it was such an so I said I stopped working on the press conference and everything else because I was watching this and I was just agog when this whole thing went down. I was like, wow. But this is what they believe, and this is where we're at. So Frank says, this is why I quit attending Commonwealth meetings. They have flipped to the other side also. Yeah. You could tell how much she cares in her voice. Her heart is bleeding for government programs to care for her people. I mean, that whole thing of, well, what about the low-income families? Well, that's why we should let them eat cake. They have the programs, and we should spend that money on those programs. Again, completely forgetting about, it's the middle Alaskans who are getting squeezed, right? I mean, I'm right in there, folks. I'm right in that middle Alaskan income. I'm not in the top 20%. And you got the 20%, the 20 to 30% on the top, and the 20 to 30% on the bottom, both in one way or another living off the government largesse, and that middle 50 to 60% who are being squeezed, that don't get the benefit of either one of those things, and they're taking it in the shorts for 8 to 10% of their income. I mean, yeah, I mean this is tough. Oh, Mike Cronk. Yeah, that's who it was. Mike Cronk was the one that was supposed to be there, but he had a scheduling conflict. So Kaufman, Kaufman's comments were pretty, he was short. It was a short. He didn't go the full 15 minutes, and it was kind of blasé. But Geissel and von Imhof gives us insight into the mindset of our betters. That's what's going on there. Lisa says, reality is that they will tax and take from the working class, then say, why are people leaving? The cost to stay here and pay for more of everything, plus pay for those that don't want to work and live off the government. And Natasha gets into this. At one point, she starts talking about GDP, not understanding that GDP is not the function of government spend, but of the private economy. I mean, it's crazy. I'm going back over here to see if there's anything else. Leela said it was an income tax was 25%, and we didn't build anything. The oils company built it. Alaska was the poorest state in the union. Yeah, but those were the good old days. The good old days of an education head tax, an income tax, no PFD, and we built a pipeline. Fat Ray says Cathy isn't the real problem here. The real problem are voters who keep putting her back in office. I mean, I just don't even know. She's digging deeper and deeper, says Rebecca, leading the fully fund everything caucus. I mean, that's the thing. We're going to put all these programs on. We're going to get all this federal money. We're going to build up these programs that are then going to have to be picked up in 5 years. And oh, by the way, we need that $685 million we gave you for your PFD. That'd be much better spent with us, because we know how to spend it better than you. I mean, here we go.
Today's recipe is the important Alaskan news of the day with a dash of sardonic smile, a pinch of eye twinkle, not that you can see that on the radio, and a touch of acidity. It goes down easier like that. Don't question our recipes. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're continuing here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get all the way through this. I'm not going to let the whole thing play as I did before, because we'll probably have to revisit this partially tomorrow after we're done with Brad Keithley. Because next up on the hot plate was, it was Kaufman, but that was very blasé. We got a Natasha von Imhof, who starts out with this evil chuckle. Anyway, we're going to start off, and I'm going to jump through this a little bit faster because I didn't expect it to take 40 minutes to go through a 15-minute commentary. But, I just can't shut up sometimes. So we'll get to this. So this is former Senator Natasha von Imhof talking about the same topic of the state. And boy, does she really not like the permanent fund.
And so I'm not in the daily minutia. I'm not worried about bills in the committee, bills and rules, bills on the floor. And I'm well rested and I'm calm. And I've been traveling around the state and talking to.
And I'm calm.
And I've been traveling around the state and talking to, different nonprofits and trade associations and different age groups, the Gen X's and the millennials and the Gen Z's and the Gen Alphas. And it's just interesting. And since I'm not campaigning, I don't have a filter. Next slide.
I don't have like you had a filter before? Is that what you're saying?
The greed
And the entitlement is astounding to me. I just don't fathom it.
Oh, I can't wait. If she doesn't have a filter now, then I can't wait for what's going on next.
So we're going to talk about the speech. Dunleavy's eighth and final State of the State addressed several.
Okay, she goes on to start talking about the governor's speech and how he talked about lower crime rates and everything else, and how there's lots of things to be, that he's right about and he should be grateful for. She goes on to tell a little bit of a story about how her future son-in-law gets punched in the face down in Anchorage, and a lot of the things that are going on, the crime, that we need more money to build homeless shelters. We need more money to build mental health facilities for these people. And it's basically talking about all the money we need to spend to help combat this homeless issue in Anchorage.
And the big elephant in the room that was never addressed, which is the millions, if not billions, that the dollars have been spent paying an annual PFD at the expense of other things, and the consequences of those repeated decisions.
So think about that. Again, she goes on, she racks up this whole thing about how we could be spending all this money on all these other things, but the one problem is not that we're not it's instead that we're paying a PFD. Listen, the disdain. And
the big elephant in the room that was never addressed, which is the millions, if not billions, that the dollars have been spent paying an annual PFD at the expense of other things, and the consequences of those repeated decisions over the decade. Next slide. So first of all, kudos to the Dunleavy administration. We have competitive licensing that attracts professionals.
Okay, she goes on to talk about some of the accomplishments of the Dunleavy administration and some of the other things, and then we get down into...
I'm talking about criminalizing crime.
Yeah, she's talking about homelessness and not putting people in jail, but creating more programs, creating more facilities, creating more things. And again, this is primarily an Anchorage problem, although that's not necessarily always Anchorage's fault. But she continues to go on about that and how she wants this to be a thing. But it's all about the money in the end.
Here's all the spending pertaining to things to the law. Department of Corrections, Department of Law, Department of Public Safety, and Judiciary. It's all in the stacked columns for the last 6 years, compared to the hundreds of millions, if not billions, that has been spent on the PFD in the yellow background.
So she has a slide here, which you can't see on the radio, obviously, but it's all the spending each year from all the different departments in the Department of Law. And behind it is this big amorphous yellow blob where they were spending on PFD. And so she's trying to say, look at what we spent on public safety, all the different departments, and look at how much we spent on the PFD, vilifying the fact that we're getting a portion of that already, that everything else has been funded. We're living on a fraction of that. But all this, look at all the money that we're wasting on the PFD.
Here's all the spending pertaining to things to the law. Department of Corrections, Department of Law, Department of Public Safety, and Judiciary. It's all in the stacked columns for the last 6 years, compared to the hundreds of millions, if not billions, that has been spent on the PFD in the yellow background. We are not building crisis intervention centers. We are not engaging enough in workforce development for nurses and social workers and case managers and recovery coaches.
Because that's government's job.
Next slide.
That's all government's job.
The governor talked about, and he highlighted in his speech, the increased investment in the North Slope and in construction and in mining and healthcare and energy. All good things, and it's all happening. But here's where we stand with the rest of the company. If you look at the
rest of the country,
line,
she meant the country. She said company, but she meant country.
But here's where we stand with the rest of the company. If you look at the squiggly gray lines on the left, this is the gross domestic product adjusted for inflation. And Alaska's the green line on the bottom. Utah's on top. And this is
so again, the graph is just showing all the states in the union, and Alaska is way down at the bottom. But this is gross domestic product. The output of the entire economy, including the private economy. And what she fails to mention here, she is treating this like the government economy is the economy. We need to be higher than this. Therefore, we need to spend more money. not pay attention to what's going on in the private economy. You want to know why the private economy is sucking so hard? Well, you're dragging billions of dollars out of it. Billions of dollars out of it. Again, this is just a prime example of how she doesn't understand, although her bio and her introduction included the fact that, she's worked in banking and finance and everything else. And she doesn't understand that gross domestic product includes the private economy.
And this is collaborated on the right-hand side by the June 2025 issue of the Alaska Economic Trends magazine published by the Alaska Department of Labor. The headline in the middle of the page there on the right says, growth has lagged the U.S. in all states but one, North Dakota. On the colorful column on the right, you can see Alaska second to last on the bottom for actual economic growth for the last 10 years.
Again, economic growth, that's because you guys are stagnating the private economy by drawing all that money out of it and not paying attention to it at all.
My opinion, I don't think the state is prioritizing enough capital investment. The capital is the blue bar. And it's around between 150, about 400 million a year on average. We had a spike in 2023, and I think it was leftover COVID funds, I believe.
Yeah, but it's all, again, another chart with the big yellow amorphous blob in the back showing PFD payments and then showing, look at how little we've spent on capital stuff, but we paid a PFD. This is reminiscent of what Cathy Geissel said in that last, in the previous Senate press conference, where she said, that is the economy. We've got to get that capital budget out.
The state's capital budget has been anemic for years. There is Alaska Energy Authority and ADA, Alaska Industrial Authority. They're doing great, but we need more money in more varied areas to really kickstart the state.
So again, it's government interventionism. We need more money in more varied areas to kickstart the state, not get out of the way and get that money into the hands of the private economy so that they could do things, but again, in government hands.
It's the dividend dilemma.
The dividend dilemma.
The dividend dilemma. Stated in another way, I don't think we have a fiscal crisis. I think we have a priority crisis. So this table represents the unrestricted general funds budget for the last 6 years. Education and health are the big ones on the far right. The PFDs on the far left, and I consider it is the 18th agency that competes, or in this case, dwarfs nearly a dozen other agencies, including capital on the far right. In the last 6 years, the collective agenda has been to spend billions of dollars on a cash payout rather than investing in meaningful capital projects or infrastructure or tourism visitor center or crisis treatment centers or roads to reach those resource opportunities.
All things that she would rather spend your PFD on than allow you to make the decision on yourself.
And I fully admit, I pressed the green button in 2021 and in 2022. I am part of the blame.
Yeah, she is definitely part of the blame because she voted for those PFDs too. This is where she's trying to do a little CYA. We're not going to finish this today. We're going to have to come back to this tomorrow. But I mean, folks, can you see it? Can you see exactly the mindset of these people? They're incensed that they have to give you your PFD. Incensed. They've got much better things to spend it on. Much better ideas of how to spend it. They know exactly what you should be spending it on. Just give it to them and they'll take care of it for you. I mean, it's kind of Orwellian. It really is. Yeah, these are Republicans? Yeah. What happened to smaller, more limited government? Apparently, when they're in charge, it's all doable. All right, my friends, we got to go for tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. See you then. I mean, dude, she gets irate later on talking about this. She is passionate about this PFD. She wants to rip it from your cold, dead fingers and spend it on what she wants to spend it on. I mean, they're saying the quiet part out loud, folks. They're going to take the PFD. That's the ploy. Cathy Geissel yearns for the days when they had an income tax, an educational head tax, and no PFD. All right. We got to go. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.